With over 14 different weapon types, each with its own mastery curve and nuance, choosing your first ever weapon or weapon to swap to can be quite tough. Some weapons have more moving parts than others, making it more technical and therefore potentially overwhelming to some, but that should not intimidate you. To some people, more resource to manage or to think about can be quite annoying. You just want to take a large weapon and bonk a monster over the head for big damages, and not think too much about setting that up. That's fine. For others, they might need a bit more spice, some rhythm to get into, or some climatic burst to work towards. Everyone has their own preferences, so we'll be breaking down each weapon's playstyle and ranking them on a quadrant chart based on a couple of different criterias. How reactive or predictive is that weapon? Essentially, how committal are the weapons' attacks? And does the weapon benefit from a longer burst window or require a bit more prep time to get to that optimal state? And lastly, for this reactive or predictive scale, we gotta consider the mobility of the weapon. How easy is it to reposition or get yourself out of danger? And if you can't move away from the danger, are you able to easily guard any incoming lethal damage? The second criteria we're gonna look at is how many layers of resource management does the weapon have? This could be things like charging up a meter or expending and restocking ammo. That counts as additional resources that you have to think about on your mental stack. Breaking it down this way should prevent newcomers from being overwhelmed with too much information. With that said, if you're a veteran hunter who mains a certain weapon, help guide your fellow newcoming hunters in the comments below by letting us know something you really enjoy about the weapon that you chose to main, or something that you think will be helpful to someone getting started with that weapon. And on that note, even with this crazy chart, I want to remind everybody, before we even start, that the rule of cool works best for learning anything. If a weapon type matches all your needs, but you just don't find it aesthetically pleasing or the moveset's not really appealing to you, you won't be that motivated to learn, and that would then translate into you not really enjoying the game. No matter how technical a weapon is or is not, how much you enjoy the look, feel, and potential of that weapon type matters a lot more. First up is the Greatsword, a badass weapon with an admittedly simple game plan. Charge up and unleash powerful swings at your foe. It boasts great range and some of the highest damage output per swing if you can land the hit. With its massive size, your mobility is greatly reduced while the weapon is unsheathed, so sheath often unless you plan on using some of the new defensive options available in this game. More on this shortly. Each swing has a heft to it that leaves the player locked into an animation, making each attack very committal. With that in mind, the weapon greatly rewards patience and an understanding of a monster's behavior pattern to consistently land those massively powerful charge slashes. With the addition of focus mode, hunters will be able to correct the trajectory of their charge slashes mid-charge, making it much easier to land those powerful hits. Even with the focus mode, the Greatsword is a very predictive weapon. Knowing where to stand and what the monster is going to do next is essential to your damage output. Outside of learning the monster and getting the timing of each version of the charge slashes that you'll have access to, there aren't any resources that you really have to worry about outside of the basics of health, stamina, and sharpness. The weapon's play pattern also helps to reduce the time you spend sharpening your sword. The Greatsword is deceptively versatile, possessing strong defensive options in wilds. The Greatsword can be used as a shield against attacks but comes with greater drawbacks than blocking with an actual shield. Perfect guards, however, prevent a lot of these drawbacks, all the while granting easier access to your most desired charge attacks, and can even build up to a new mechanic in this game called Power Clashes, a mini game that, if successful, will topple the monster with a powerful attack and then leave you with a window of opportunity to lay down the hurt. Overall, the Greatsword is a powerful teacher for any hunter. It can feel punishing or demoralizing to use this weapon against faster, more aggressive monsters, especially if you are new and are just starting to reach the higher ranks. But once it clicks with you, once you can see the opportunity to attack, everything changes. If you are ever interested in the Greatsword, this iteration of the weapon seems to be the most intuitive and rewarding yet. It is a highly committal weapon that is not very resource intensive. Next up is the Sword and Shield. Similar to the Greatsword, it has a lot of versatility. The Sword and Shield offers a great mix of offensive and defensive options, but with added mobility. If you have commitment issues, this weapon is for you. Attacking with this weapon can be quite fun as the player swaps between hitting enemies with the sword and the shield. Attacks with the shield deals blunt damage, a special type of damage that can inflict stun on monsters that topples them, as long as you apply enough blunt damage to a monster's skull. Not many weapons can consistently apply this type of damage. Each swing of your weapon can also be steered, allowing you to reposition constantly. This is further augmented by the focus mode. Sword and Shield can also perfect guard, giving this small shield a much higher impact as it reduces a lot of the drawbacks of not using a full shield like a lance or a gunlance, all the while reducing the knockback animation, granting players the option to go into multiple different damaging combo routes. While not the flashiest weapon, with attack chains like the perfect rush that rewards more damage to those who properly time their button presses, to the addition of a charged chop attack, the Sword and Shield can rack up a surprising amount of damage very quickly. The perfect rush combo of the Sword and Shield can be followed up with an attack called Scaling Slash, a move that launches the hunter into the air and deals mounting damage, granting the Sword and Shield a consistent way to mount monsters as well, without the reliance of an external factor like a hill or a sacred to jump off of. Just like blunt damage, not many weapons can consistently deal mount damage without relying on said external factors. The Sword and Shield is not very resource intensive, just like the Greatsword, and it's also very intuitive, allowing the hunter to lock in on a monster's attack patterns. And if you're not the most patient player, it won't actively punish you. Overall, it is a great weapon to learn the game with, as it exposes you to many different systems of the game without being overwhelming. Next up is the Lance, the quintessential tank weapon, a weapon that specializes in blocking with minimal drawbacks. Not only can you tank the strongest attacks in this game and survive, you'll also be able to safely apply damage with your quick thrusts with minimal risk. Once you understand the monster's moveset, or if the monster becomes too predictable, you'll be able to make full use of perfect guards and the Lance's very own charge counters to dispense damage. This weapon's mobility can be awkward compared to most weapons, especially if you're just starting out, as your dodge roll is replaced with a hop while the weapon is unsheathed. Once mastered, you'll be able to use these hops to stick to enemies like glue. The Lance is not flashy, but offers an insane amount of consistency that isn't really appreciated enough. This weapon's play pattern is also a bit more forgiving. You're able to stick to a game plan of block and poke without having to study up on everything the monster can do. That's not to say it doesn't help greatly to learn the monster, it's just that you won't be punished as severely as other weapons for not knowing. If you get overwhelmed easily by a large moveset or micromanaging different resources, the Lance can help alleviate these issues while giving you a sense of security when fighting the scarier monsters of this game, all the while teaching you the importance of stamina management. It is not a resource-intensive weapon and is not very committal as well. But don't sleep on that just because it is a simpler weapon. Simple can be great. It gives you more headspace to focus on the fundamentals, all the while giving you more freedom to actually look at the monster, see what it's doing, and not worry about dying or carding. If you're looking for something with a similar amount of consistency and safety, but a bit more flair to it, this next weapon will be right up your alley. The Gunlance is essentially a lance that can fire explosive rounds called shellings. Unlike a gun, the shots coming out of the Gunlance must be done in close proximity to the monster. These shell attacks do run on an ammo system that must be reloaded when the chamber of the Gunlance is empty. There are 3 distinct shell types for Gunlances called normal, long, and wide, each with its own distinct advantages and disadvantages, which adds a layer of complexity that can be quite fun if you enjoy the idea of a lance but don't like how straightforward that weapon is. Shellings, when used, deals fixed damage regardless of the hit zone of the monster, meaning it doesn't matter if you hit the monster's weak point or not, you're gonna deal the same amount of damage, making the Gunlance quite menacing against monsters with a hard to reach weak point, or if you don't have the sharpness to pierce the monster's hide just yet. In Monster Hunter Wilds, you are granted more mobility when doing the shell attacks, making the Gunlance deceptively mobile. Landing shell attacks on an enemy builds up the Wyvern Fire gauge. Wyvern Fire is a high committal attack that has your hunter charging up your Gunlance to release a huge burst of damage. It is immensely powerful but also requires prep time and finesse to land consistently throughout a fight. Once you really understand a monster's behavior pattern, your damage output with this weapon skyrockets. The Gunlance can also implant worm stakes onto monsters, dealing consistent damage independent of your hunter that ends with an explosion. This worm stake runs on an ammo system, so it must be reloaded after each use. An additional spice to the Gunlance is that it has a couple attacks with guard points, granting you added safety when going on the offensive. Guard points automatically trigger a guard for your hunter if a monster hits you while you're in the middle of certain attack animations that have these guard points. Although the Gunlance has several different resources to manage, its simpler moveset and rhythmic playstyle that keeps you relatively close to the enemy and constantly dealing damage makes the weapon more intuitive than you would think. Once mastered, the Gunlance can consistently dispense some of the highest damage in this game. It is a resource-intensive weapon that offers great rewards for reading an enemy correctly. The next weapon is a fan favorite. The Longsword is a weapon that is simple to pick up but hard to master. It boasts many different combo routes that changes based on the level of your spirit gauge, all the while offering great attack range and mobility. As mentioned, the ramp up and management of the spirit gauge is vital to any hunter's success with the Longsword. There are 3 different levels to this gauge, from white spirit to yellow spirit to red spirit, that builds up whenever the hunter lands a spirit slash. Each time you level up your spirit gauge, you'll get a passive damage boost that ramps up even farther. Building up to the red spirit gauge will augment your existing moveset while granting you powerful new moves such as the Helm Splitter and various damaging follow-up options to your existing combo strings. It also helps that the animations for these attacks are awesome to look at. The Longsword is a flow state weapon that offers direction on how to play. You're given a goal of building up a resource, and once you build up that resource and get comfortable with it, you'll then unlock the next level of mastery, which is all about going in and out of different spirit levels to maintain a high amount of damage output. The Longsword is very fun, easy to pick up, and yet still maintains a high level of nuance. It has a lot of different tools and can accommodate various different playstyles. You'll be handsomely rewarded for understanding a monster's attack patterns while looking like a badass. The Longsword has a great mix of offensive and defensive capabilities, with a variety of ways to build up towards the red spirit, either by barraging your enemies with attacks or parrying an attack with a well-timed EA slash. And while you don't need to be optimal with your spirit gauge management to get that high damage, there's a very satisfying sense of mastery and achievement once you really understand the tools at your disposal at each spirit level. It rewards a predictive and reactive playstyle in equal parts. The Switch Axe is a stylish, aggressive weapon that has been giving new life with defensive options that the weapon type previously lacked in older titles. Boasting wide reach, fluid and fast swings, and the ability to switch between 2 different modes, the axe mode and the sword mode. The entirety of the weapon relies on your ability to manage what's called the switch gauge. Every time you're in sword mode and you land an attack, you'll consume a bit of the switch gauge. But here's the thing, while in sword mode, each of your attacks have the ability to pierce any monster part regardless of your weapon's sharpness and grants your attack bonuses aligning with the weapon's files. There are 6 different file types within the game, from simple attack damage augment to status ailments like exhaust, poison, or paralysis. Special note on the exhaust files. This allows the sword mode of a switch axe. When you attack enemies with the exhaust files, you'll deal blunt damage if you hit the enemies in the head, allowing you to build up stun, something that is uncommon in most weapon types. After landing a certain amount of attacks in sword mode, your hunter will be put into an amped state, granting additional attack power increases while also adding mini explosions to each of your attacks. The amped state also grants the strongest attack in the Switch Axe's arsenal, amply titled the Full Release Slash, a powerful finisher that puts you back into axe mode after it's unleashed. To sum it up, if you want to access all of this power that the Switch Axe has, you're gonna have to maintain and build up the switch gauge. And the only way that that switch gauge recovers after it's expended is by sheathing your weapon and waiting for a time, or by getting into the power axe state by landing what's called a heavy slam while in the axe mode of your Switch Axe. New to Wilds is the augment to the Switch Axe's Rising Slash. It is now considered an offset attack, meaning that this weapon now has the ability to counter a monster's attack with an attack of their own. When timed correctly, you'll be able to topple a monster and then follow up with a strong attack with great follow-up potential. Simply put, you'll want to slip in and out of sword mode when any opportunity to deal damage arises. Some of the Switch Axe's best attacks are very committal and require buildup of resources. Learning when you'll be able to pull off these moves without putting yourself in danger is tantamount to success. It's a badass weapon to use, and you'll be able to tell right away when you get good with this weapon. Mismanagement of the switch gauge can be quite punishing. Overall, the Switch Axe is high risk, high reward. A great contrast to the Switch Axe is the Hammer, a hyper-aggressive, high-damaging weapon without the commitment and resource management. You really could describe this weapon as a hee I bunk monster over the head with large hammer, and that would describe this weapon to a T, but I don't want to understate or misrepresent how impactful this weapon can be, especially in the hands of a skilled player. The Hammer excels at applying stun damage to the enemy, providing a form of crowd control for any party as long as the hunter is able to reach the monster's head and apply hammer to said skull. Similar to the Greatsword, the Hammer has a mighty charge that amps up in damage the longer you hold that charge. This mighty charge attack can also be comboed into. New to the Hammer is an offset attack that can be held. When released at the same time as a monster's attack, you'll topple an enemy while dealing massive damage. It also lets you follow up into a mighty charge swing. The Hammer's lack of complexity is a benefit, not a drawback. You'll be able to deal consistently high damage while only worrying about learning the monster's play pattern. And once you get good at those headshots, your entire team will know. Certain body parts can only be broken by blunt damage as well, something that the Hammer excels at. On the opposite hand, hammers can't cut tails, so if you're looking for a secondary weapon, make sure it's something that provides cutting damage. Another weapon that consistently deals blunt damage is the Hunting Horn. While traditionally a support weapon, the Hunting Horn has received many new abilities and mechanics that greatly increases the damage output of the weapon. More on this in just a second. The Hunting Horn's unique mechanic is that of the performance. You can play different notes to apply different buffs to you or your teammates. These notes can be stored even when you're not actively performing with the Hunting Horn, so it's a bit more forgiving than it looks, and each Hunting Horn that you can craft will have a different array of buffs that you can apply, ranging anywhere from reducing stamina consumption, increasing your attack damage, to preventing your hunters from flinching when a monster roars at you. In WoW specifically, Hunting Horns have access to a new attack type called Echo Bubbles. Echo Bubbles is a zone that the Hunting Horn user can drop that not only buffs any user standing in the zone, but also allows your performance to deal additional damage while you're performing inside the Echo Bubble zone. The hunter with the Hunting Horn can drop up to 3 Echo Bubbles at the same time. Smartly positioning these Echo Bubbles and controlling the map can greatly increase the Hunting Horn's damage. A fun thing to note is that you can perform and apply buffs while mounted on your Sacred. True to its nature as a musical weapon, timing your attacks properly will increase the amount of damage you deal with each hit depending on what actions you're doing. If you're interested in taking this weapon to the next level, that is something you'll have to learn. Speaking of timing your attacks, the Hunting Horn also has an offset attack that can be used to retaliate against a monster coming at you. The Hunting Horn is a super underrated weapon with a lot of bonuses and a deceptively high skill ceiling, especially in Monster Hunter WoWs. This is probably the most technical I've ever seen the Hunting Horn, but even then, it's not too hard to learn, but it has a lot of upsides to what it can do. Whether you're playing solo, with a party, or with NPC hunters, the impact that you can bring with this weapon can be felt almost immediately. There are a couple of resources to manage, but it is very forgiving. It's not super committal. Finding opportunities to perform may be harder in the higher difficulty hunts. Next on the list is dual blades. These weapons have low reach but offers extreme mobility. You'll constantly be swinging at the enemies while bobbing and weaving through monster attacks with your invulnerability frames, all the while dipping in and out of a stance called Demon Mode. Although each individual hit of the dual blades may not do a lot of damage, it is quite easy to rack up a high hit count with the weapon, making elemental and status damage quite enticing for the weapon type. It is a deceptive weapon that is simple to use, but with a resource mastery curve that can be quite punishing if you fail to learn it. Because of the low damage on each individual swing, it is highly important that the dual blade user sticks very close to the enemy and is constantly attacking at all times, making stamina management very important because stamina is the key resource that will help you stick to an enemy and deal damage while avoiding damage yourself, while also being able to dip in and out of Demon Mode. The Demon Mode stance augments the user's attack power, combo potential, and changes the nature of their dodge at the cost of rapidly depleting stamina. There are consumables that can reduce this drawback, so once you have a supply of that, the strain of Demon Mode will become less of an issue. Also, the previously high commitment of launching a Demon Dance attack in Demon Mode is no longer a thing. Demon Flurry Dance has been broken up into 3 parts, where the hunter can choose to dodge and reposition in between. With the addition of the Focus Mode, you'll be able to reorient your Demon Dance mid-swing, making it easier to position yourself correctly. Landing attacks while in Demon Mode fills up a meter that, once full, puts you in Arch Demon Mode, granting you Demon Mode bonuses even when you switch off of Demon Mode. The dual blades can also trigger what's called a perfect evade while in either demon or archdemon stances. By dodging right as an attack is about to hit you, you'll be put in an extended animation that not only deals damage but makes you invulnerable for that time and grants you a damage bonus for a short period of time alongside a very stylish glow. While you're glowing, each time you dodge, you'll also deal damage. The dual blades' low range can make cutting tails quite difficult versus some monsters and may put you in more compromising situations if you're not careful, forcing you to rely on your ability to dodge attacks. Essentially, the dual blade offers a high-octane playstyle that greatly rewards reaction time. Insect Glaives offer a unique niche in being a weapon that grants the hunter unparalleled vertical mobility. Because of its ability to vault hunters into the sky and apply consistent mounting damage with air attacks, Insect Glaives can consistently mount and topple monsters for any hunting team. The quirk to Insect Glaives are the Kinsects, bug companions that can be equipped alongside the Insect Glaive that can be launched at different monster parts to extract buffs from them and apply them to your hunters. The hunter can hold up to 3 buffs, and by stacking up these buffs, your moveset and damage output expands. The extracted buffs are color-coded by red, orange, white, and green, and different monster parts will offer different buffs to the hunter. When you have all essences stored on the hunter, certain attacks with your Insect Glaive will automatically launch Kinsects at the enemy, dealing extra damage. The red, white, and orange extracts can be stored to the hunter to get buffs, while green essences automatically heal the hunter. Like the Longsword, the Insect Glaive has a ramp-up playstyle that can offer a structure to approaching any fight. You want to build up your essences to unlock better moves and higher damage output, and then convert those essences once fully collected into a big finisher. The true nuance of the Insect Glaive comes from the Kinsect which possesses a wide variety of attributes like attack types, dust type, and kinsect level. Each of these attributes can be customized, and different kinsect types can be swapped between different insect glaives. You won't need to know all these things right away, so don't be intimidated by all the moving parts of the insect glaive. The playstyle of this weapon is more intuitive than it seems. Gather red, white, and orange essences, convert essences into damage, and repeat. Overall, it is a highly mobile weapon that is more intimidating than it actually is, with many quick strikes and a nuanced kinsect system that can be tailored to your liking once you understand the game and your playstyle a bit better. Next up is the Charged Blade, one of, if not the most technical weapon in Monster Hunter Wilds. It is a weapon with two different modes, a sword and shield mode, and an axe mode that can be further upgraded by building up the Charged Blade's resource system called Files. Landing attacks with your sword strikes will charge up the weapon from yellow to red. Continuing to hit enemies in your sword and shield mode will cause the weapon to overcharge, making it so that you bounce off of enemies. This is the game's way of telling you to go store that energy into the shield. Energy is then converted into files that act as ammo for your axe mode. While in axe mode, the Charged Blade's attack range is greatly increased. You'll also be able to spend the files that you've collected to deal damage unique to the file types. Similar to the switch axe, you'll have files that will deal extra damage or apply an alternate type of damage like elemental or stun/exhaust damage. The true value of these files comes from the elemental discharge mechanic that the Charged Blade has. You can consume all of the files to deal an absurd amount of damage with your elemental discharge. You're able to actually cancel this discharge and store all that energy into your shield, augmenting your shield's defensive capabilities. Now you take less chip damage and knockback with each attack, making your defenses just as strong as a lance, which also translates to more damage when you go into axe mode with your Charged Blade. And the next time you try to do an elemental discharge, you're gonna have a great time. One of the most fun parts of a Charged Blade is its ability to utilize guard points, certain attacks with animations that automatically block for you if an enemy attacks you during an animation. The most common one is switching from sword mode to axe mode and vice versa. I do want to note that guard points are not something that you'll have to learn. An experienced veteran hunter can make use of guard points to deal a lot more damage more consistently with its follow-ups, but it is not a necessity. Don't let this intimidate you. Treat guard points as an extra bonus. Some of your attacks will automatically guard for you. That's nice, right? Don't worry about it. In Monster Hunter Wilds, you can also access the Charged Blade's Savage Axe mode or Power Axe mode by using the newer mechanics in Monster Hunter Wilds. Things like Perfect Guard into the Savage Axe follow-up or unleashing a focus strike on a wound will put you in the Savage Axe mode, where your axe attacks have a chainsaw-like property to them. There's a lot more I can say about Charged Blades, but then I'd probably be getting way too deep into it for what I'm trying to do here. The greatest thing about Charged Blades is that it can and will feel very clunky when you first start using it. Charged Blades have a lot of resources that you have to manage, but as you learn the weapon and start to master it, all that clunkiness, it disappears. The amount of commitment certain attacks will need and how guard points really work, all of a sudden, this complex weapon just becomes smooth as butter. You might not even be using the weapon any differently. But just because you understand a bit more about the weapon, the guard points, and the charged up axe mode that you're working towards, everything becomes more intentional, more methodical. If you're somebody who likes diving deep into the mechanics of your weapon, the Charged Blade is for you. It can do everything once you master it, even your taxes. The next couple weapons that we're gonna cover break the rules of Monster Hunter in a particular way, as they all offer ranged damage. Not that ranged damage invalidates every single monster you're going to be fighting, more so attacking from a farther away range changes the game quite drastically. To balance out your ability to deal damage at range, there is a critical distance for each of these ranged weapon types, where you have to be within a certain range to deal damage, otherwise your damage is significantly reduced. And also, now that we can change between different weapon types really quickly mid-hunt, having a ranged weapon by your side if you don't know what else to bring, it's a pretty good idea. Let's start off with the bow, a weapon that received quite a bit of love in Monster Hunter Wilds. Instead of consuming ammo, bows build up a trick gauge with each successive hit or successive perfect evades called Discerning Dodge. This gauge can be expended to load up tracer shots or apply a specific coating to your next 8 shots. There are 8 different types of coatings, ranging from straightforward damage increasing ones to coatings that apply stat ailments on hit. Each bow will have a restriction on what coating can be applied while that bow is equipped. Attacks with the bow can be charged up to increase the attack power of the arrow and also to change up the shot type as the bow is being charged. The type of shot at each charge level will depend on the bow itself. Do note that while charging, your stamina constantly drains. Even with the stamina drain, the bow is very mobile. Dodging at the right time while having the bow unsheathed will trigger a Discerning Dodge. Not only will a Discerning Dodge increase your trick gauge, but it will also fully restore your stamina, allowing you to rain down more shots at the monster. The bow overall has become a more resource-intensive weapon that offers a lot of fun ways to deal damage while offering a more reactive and fast playstyle. If you prefer more prep time or variety in the ammo types that are available to you, light bowguns and heavy bowguns are the way to go. Both bowguns are similar but offer a very different play pattern depending on what you're into. The light bowgun offers superior mobility and a rapid fire mode that lets you consistently pelt monsters with bullets. It also allows you to shoot and reload between each dash command. The heavy bowgun, on the other hand, offers higher damage output per shot with a slower average rate of fire. Your hunter's mobility is also greatly hampered. Heavy bowguns, however, have a shield that can be used to block and also has an auto guard feature that you can use. Unlike previous generations, being able to guard is very powerful, as it allows you to use universal mechanics like perfect guards and power clashes to your heart's content. The heavy bowgun also has a offset attack that you can use to parry an enemy's attack and topple them. Like the light bowgun's rapid fire mode, the heavy bowgun has a special ignition mode that uses a special ammo type specific to that weapon to deal extra damage or add additional effects to each of your shots for a limited time. Once your ignition meter runs out, you can build it up again from successfully hitting an enemy over a period of time. Certain bowguns gets access to supportive ammo types that can heal and buff your party members' attacks and defenses. With the proper loadout, both bowguns can turn any unsuspecting monsters into Swiss cheese. Unlike the bow, you'll have to do some item management to get the most out of both of these weapons. And although both types of bowguns are resource intensive, the light bowgun leans towards a more reactive and low committal playstyle, while the heavy bowgun benefits a lot more from a predictive playstyle with how limited the mobility of the weapon is. And there you have it, a crazy quadrant chart that you can reference or showcase to any of your friends who are suffering from decision paralysis. If you decided upon a weapon, let us know in the comments below what they are. Personally, I'm going to be rocking the dual blades and picking back up the Greatsword once again. And I'm interested in picking up the hunting horn as a secondary weapon. The idea of zone control with the echo bubble seems like a bit of fun, and finally I'll be able to sit back and support fellow hunters with buffs instead of asking for buffs myself. If you have any additional information you'd like to include for your favorite weapon of choice, let us know in the comments below. That little tidbit of information can help a fellow rookie hunter lock in on something that really fits their playstyle. And as always, support your boy by hitting that like button and subscribe for more Monster Hunter Wilds content. Thanks. If you're up for even more information about Monster Hunter Wilds, check out this video on screen right now. My name is Varsona, and I'll see you in the next video.